Hello, everyone. I see folks still filtering through, but we'll get started. Welcome, first of all. This is the Epic Air Quality Fund application launch. My name is Christa Hasenkopf. I'm the director of the Clean Air Program at the Energy Policy Institute at the University of Chicago. I'm joined by my colleague, Farah Kazi, who is the Epic Air Quality Fund project manager. And we're really excited to talk to you today about the what, why, and how to competitively apply for the Epic Air Quality Fund. And so just to give some process points, we'll share the recording and slide deck of this webinar afterwards. It'll be available and emailed directly to everyone who registered, as well as made available online afterwards. We'll address questions that we received through the registration process in this presentation. And if you still have questions, type them in the Q&A box, and Farah will help address them. And even if we don't get to all the questions, our FAQ page, which we will link to shortly, will be updated to address any missing items. All right, so first we're going to start with a little background on the premise of the fund. So the fund has developed...
Sorry to interrupt you, but I think one of the participants is having an issue with the sound. I hope the rest of you can hear Christa clearly. If you cannot, please let us know.
Yes, please do. Please do. And Farah, just interrupt me if it turns out multiple people have that issue. All right, so the premise of the fund is based on a report that we published this past December 2023. And we had some findings. One was that closing PM 2.5 data gaps is a key catalytic step towards improving air quality. Second item was we identified countries with the likeliest, largest opportunities for a small, well-supported strategic effort to affect positive national level changes in PM 2.5. And three, we talked with a lot of local actors across the world who were doing this work or who were well poised to do this work about what they needed to better do their work, what they saw as opportunities, and what they saw as obstacles. And there were several findings. One of them, though, was that 50 to 100K USD per year was a meaningful amount to fill data gaps in their particular location. And then in the document, we also defined guiding tenets for ultimately how we're operating the fund or aiming to operate the fund on how to inject more resources into the international air quality space, specifically in places with air quality, specifically PM 2.5 data gaps in the maximally most effective way. If you're interested in that report, we have a link as well to that. So actually about the Epic Air Quality Fund, the goal is to fill PM 2.5 data gaps and expand access to PM 2.5 data for 1 billion people in 50 plus countries in 2030. And by doing that, achieve multiple national level impacts along the way. And so again, the goal is to fund local actors in countries with little or no available public air quality data. We're requiring open access of PM 2.5 data generated from all projects we're supporting, along with plans to drive national level impact. And we'll define what both of those mean in this context a little bit later. We'll be supporting 10 to 15 groups over an 18-month period. And the deadline to apply will be September 10th, 2024, 11:59 p.m. in your local time zone. And I do want to note, we will be evaluating outstanding applications before this date on a rolling basis. And that's primarily because we're really excited to get these funds out the door and having impact in various places across the world. So before we get into too many more specifics, if you join this webinar, you're interested in knowing why should you apply. So let me make my best pitch to you and see if it resonates. So one, this is funding important work that has been overlooked and under-resourced for many, many years. We're able to fund about 50K USD for projects involving lower cost sensors and 75K USD and up for reference grade type monitoring projects. We're aiming to make this funding flexible. We require you to submit a budget as part of this process, and we'll outline that. But we are flexible on how this ultimately is used because the funds are ultimately used because we know doing new projects in places where they haven't often been done is hard and unpredictable. And we also want to reduce the paperwork load and the bureaucracy of these awards as well. And given the nature of the way that we have received this funding, we are able to provide that flexible funding. And I think this is a very important component in the success of the projects we fund, and ultimately in our success as a fund as well. We have a long-term funding intent. So like any entity, we do not yet have our funding out to 2030, but our goal is to provide support over multiple years because that's where we think the impact will be most likely to happen. It's not going to happen in year one. It will happen over a series of years. And we were aiming to provide that support if projects are meeting the fund's data generation and sharing criteria specifically. And another reason we want you to apply is we want to be your cheerleaders. So you'll have epic cheerleaders if you receive an award. We're ready to be major connectors and amplifiers in the global air quality community about your work. And even if we're unable to make an award for you this round, we do commit to sharing quality applications with our networks where it's relevant and if you give us permission. So going back to that long-term funding intent and the strain I've mentioned on the importance that we see in the multi-year component of these awards, to give some background, we are basing this long-term component and the importance of it on local actor conversations, our own experiences in doing this kind of work, and also research. So here's a figure from John Lanauza in 2022, where they looked at air quality monitors at US embassies and consulates across the world that were placed in cities that had very little air quality data, pre-existing air quality data, and specifically PM 2.5 monitors. And they shared this data in an open way. And there's a variety of idiosyncratic stories one could look at in any given specific place. But the overriding trend, the causal trend they saw in this work is that PM 2.5 levels in a given city over 3, 4, 5 years and beyond actually went down, again, as a cause of having these monitors, according to the study. And so I think that emphasizes how important it is to have this multi-year funding to support this work, and why our commitment is and our aim is to do that. So I'm going to go over 4 key things we're looking for in projects. The first one is that they take place in countries where there are significant PM 2.5 data gaps and where it seems most likely that a small strategic effort to support the work can make the biggest impact. So to do that, as I mentioned, we've done an analysis and published that in the report I mentioned. And we're using this guiding priority list from that analysis to guide us. So here's a figure, a map basically of those countries. You should now have the link in the chat of where these figures are. And I think it's worth taking a moment and talking through what we mean by priority list and how we're using it. So again, we see this as a guiding priority list, not an exclusionary list. The underlying analysis, we know because we did it, is imperfect. We're relying on imperfect data sets and also quantifying something that also has a lot of qualitative aspects. So in recognition of that, we're using this to guide us in where the priority countries for the fund are, but not necessarily excluding other countries outside of that at this stage. That said, I do want to be clear, for example, in a country with thousands of monitors and is very well resourced, let's say like the US, there is a very low chance we would fund work there to have that, that national level impact. On the margin, one more funded project will not be able to, likely be able to have that national level impact, for example, in the US. And so this is one of the most frequent questions we got. We'll also address this in a different way later. But again, can I apply to do work in a country not on the priority list? The answer is yes. But you'll need to make the case that this single project can make a national level impact And that's going to be harder where there's a lot of resources or in countries where there are already many government monitors. So a second thing we're looking for is that local actors are conducting this work. Again, we think they play the key role in driving long-term clean air action for several reasons. But to give some sense of what we mean by local actor, we've purposely left this as an imprecise definition that ultimately the applicant will be the guide of. But some guiding questions. Do you consider yourself a local actor? If you do not, we will not. And some other questions to consider. Do you speak the relevant languages of the place you intend to propose work? Do you have a long-term vested interest in the well-being of this place? Do you have a professional and social presence in this place? If your answer is no to the above, we'd ask that you reconsider applying or share the opportunities with a colleague who would likely answer yes to these questions. 3, we're looking for the ability to generate and openly share stationary outdoor PM 2.5 data continuously for 12 of the 18 months of the award. And the data that can be generated with a variety of different instrumentation. We don't specify whether you should have a low cost sensors or a BAM or a reference grade equipment. What we'll really be looking for is a fitness for your specific national level impact purpose and your demonstrated ability to operate whatever device you choose. For example, a BAM may require more expertise than, say, a typical low-cost sensor on the market. It does vary, but broadly speaking, that's true. And so what I mean by fitness for your specific national level impact purpose, in some cases, you can imagine you might need a reference grade instrument to drive certain national level priorities or policy, to have legal teeth, et cetera. But it can also be overkill to have a reference grade instrument if you can achieve the same objective with a lower cost sensor. Vice versa, it may make sense to have a lower cost sensor, to have a BAM instead of a lower cost sensor. So it really depends on your specific purpose. We're open to either. You just need to explain how that makes the most sense in the application. We also require the data you generate to be legally owned by you and shared publicly and freely by you in a format that meets some minimum requirements and with what's called a CC by 4.0 license. Before I explain those items, I'll just say the reason we need the data to be legally owned by you is so that you have the legal ability to share that data downstream. Some air quality sensor companies allow you to own the data, some do not. And so that's why we're making this distinction in advance. And we also know it can be quite difficult to parse terms and conditions of various companies. So, and to know precisely what we mean by making data publicly and freely open in a particular format. So we've created this open data guidance doc that should also be shared in your chat. There's also a link here. And so this details pretty specifically our public data sharing requirements. We also have a table of air quality sensor companies about evaluating if their data policies meet our award requirements. The table is not exhaustive. It's not meant to advocate one way or the other on a given sensor company. It's meant to alleviate, hopefully, a portion of applicants from having to figure out some of these details themselves. If you are interested in using some other sensor type or company, you're free to do that. You would then need to independently go and figure out whether their terms of service, their data policies meet the requirements of our award or not. So the fourth item is we'll be looking for whether the projects can achieve a national level impact with the PM 2.5 data they generate in a specific systemic way. And so we're looking for really a clear path to understand how generating that data achieves that particular impact and ultimately to reduce, with the goal of reducing air pollution over time. And so let me give a few examples because there's many ways one could interpret this. So some examples of national level systemic impacts by how we're defining them for our award process. For example, a project that will work with a society of pharmacists to use the data to advocate for instituting an air quality standard. This is actually one we've seen. So that's fairly specific. They're using a particular group, working with a particular group to use the data to advocate for a specific policy measure. Perhaps a project with a legal team who can use the data to shine a light on a national open data policy that's not being honored for government air quality data in the service of opening up that data, if that's seen as a major block towards progress in that country. That would be relevant. Perhaps a project that aims to partner with a public communications team to use the data to measure and communicate progress on an existing clean air measure in a country. These would all be, for examples of national level systemic impacts. Examples of non-national level or non-systemic or unclear impacts. So, for example, if a project were to fill a city level air quality data gap that will not have any national level relevance, that's not a priority area for us. So we presume most projects are going to be working at a city or equivalent rural area. You can't have monitors everywhere, but we're looking for whatever the system in place that has some sort of national level relevance. So for non-systemic examples, this would be using the data to advocate, for example, for better masking or indoor filtration work instead of support policy acts or actions that don't address the root causes of air pollution. So masking and indoor air filtration is extremely important, but we're looking for projects that can address those systemic root causes of air pollution. So that would not be in the purview of this award process. For unclear impacts, it's not enough in the description of how you will achieve impact to say you'll conduct certain activities with national level stakeholders. We're looking for more specificity there. And publishing research for us is not an end in itself. It would need to, again, tie to some national level impact in a direct way. So for eligibility criteria, and just doing the basics of like who can apply and what type of organizations can apply. For organization types, we're open to pretty much any type: universities, governments, nonprofits, for-profits. They do need to be formal entities that are legally authorized to receive funds from a U.S. institution, including having a working bank account. And individuals who are interested in applying cannot do so on their own, but they can do so in partnership with an organization that meets those criteria above. In terms of countries that are eligible, all countries are eligible to apply, except for those on the U.S. Department of State sponsors of terrorism list. That's currently Cuba, North Korea, Iran, and Syria. And in terms of the number of entries per org, one entry per team at an organization is allowed. So you can have multiple applications coming from or entries coming from a given organization, but one per team. And that's really defined as who the PI is. So multiple entries from the same team lead or the same PI are not allowed. So we're going to give some examples from that of who cannot apply and who can apply to help illustrate this. So again, you cannot apply if it's any work that's proposed in countries that are on that State Department list. You could not apply if you're an informal nonprofit with no way to accept funds. You cannot apply if you're an individual with no entity through which funds can flow either. The same individual listed as a PI for multiple applications, that's not valid either. So in terms of who can apply, and again, an organization based in a country that is or is not on the priority list, a host organization based in one country that can support an individual or informal entity in the same country where the work will take place. So for example, if an individual in Nigeria who doesn't have their own way to accept funds can partner with a formal nonprofit also in Nigeria. Additionally, a host organization based in one country can support an individual or informal entity from another country where the work will take place. So for example, a nonprofit in Burundi may not yet have incorporation, but they can partner, say, for example, with a university in South Africa or Burundi for that matter, to allow the funds to flow through them. So there is a route for informal entities or individuals to access funds, but they need to do through a formal organization. And that organization can be based in any country, which is not, again, in those at state sponsors of terrorism list. So who else can apply? 2 different teams or PIs from the same entity, for example, at a university, in 2 different applications, that's fine. There can even be overlap between the 2 teams in terms of the support staff, but the PIs must be different. And work proposed for multiple countries is fine as long as there are national level impacts in each of those countries that you're aiming to work. So then for the selection criteria, so you meet the eligibility criteria, but how will we be ranking and prioritizing how we're selecting awards? All else being equal, applications from priority countries, those identified, as I mentioned on that list, the high and medium high opportunity countries in our analysis, again, in the chat, if you're joining later, will rank higher than from other countries. So the likelihood, we'll be looking at the likelihood that a project will generate and share outdoor stationary PM 2.5 data over 12 months in an 18-month period. And that they're able to do so in terms of the fund's open data requirements. That'll be a consideration. We'll be looking at the likelihood that a project can achieve a specific national level systemic impact on air pollution. And another item is we will look at the proven track record in conducting these types of projects by the team that's proposed, or if they do not have a track record yet, and we do expect in some places that might be the case. So in some locations, this may be the first project of this sort. And so if a compelling plan can be shared of how applicants will address any current knowledge or expertise gaps, that is fine too. So some application process items, I've mentioned the deadline a couple of times, but we listed up there. Again, outstanding applications may be evaluated before this date on a rolling basis. We're excited to receive applications and again, get funding into the hands of local actors who can achieve this change. So that's why we've set that way. For application details, also in your chat, but we link to the EPIC Air Quality Fund application page. On this page, there's a Google Form app, and also a PDF of the application is available in advance, so you can check out all the questions. There's a link to the budget template and instructions on that. There's the priority country list and the open data guidance as well on this page. We want you to be aware that after that's submitted, no revisions are possible after you've done so. So please do read the instructions carefully. In a couple of weeks, we will advertise an open office hours to all registrants on here and through social media to offer the ability for folks who have specific questions about the project that they're thinking of or other logistical questions as well. So with that, we're going to go into a few questions that we've received from the registration process that folks have had. One that came in was, what should be the spatial scale of the research? Regional or local, urban or rural? And so we're truly agnostic as long, again, as the work is in service of a national level systemic impact that can be described in a specific way. So some examples that get to this regional or urban or rural point, monitoring in a single city that will likely shape a specific national level policy, that makes sense. Establishing a rural network that illustrates a specific national level concern for rural air quality issues, that also makes sense. So again, we're agnostic to the spatial scale within a given country, or whether it's urban or rural, as long as there's that national level systemic impact. I do want to make one side note here with the question. It mentioned research. So again, these awards are not for research per se, but for impact activities. We're not looking for research outcomes, published peer-reviewed papers. Maybe they're a byproduct of the process, maybe they're the driver in a particular location, the case would need to be made for that. But in and of themselves, research is not the overall goal of the work. So number two, someone asked, can we do multiple applications for different countries in West Africa? So again, any given team, and specifically any single person, it can be PI in just one application. However, one can propose in one application to do work in multiple countries, but the aim would need to remain true to the fact that we'd want to see national level impacts for each country that you'd be doing work in. If you could only show a national level impact or the likelihood of a national level impact in one country, we'd want to see those resources be used for that one country. Third question, someone asked, can we add and measure other air quality concerns, notably greenhouse gases? Our focus really is on supporting PM 2.5 data collection, sharing, and impacts. So we don't intend for the funds to support other air quality concerns. That said, if an instrumentation has that you pick ends up having other components it's measuring, that's fine. But it'll be ancillary to the actual support of what we're looking to do. So the fourth question, my country is not listed in the 75 countries list as high and medium high opportunities for closing nationwide PM 2.5 data gaps. We apply for the fund. I know we've covered this, but we have received this a lot, so I did want to address it again. So again, yes, applications are open worldwide. You're eligible, but there will need to be a compelling case for how one small strategic PM 2.5 project can make an incremental difference in a national level policy. This will be especially, again, difficult in places with a lot of resources, funding resources in a variety of different ways, or with large monitoring networks already. All right, the fifth question, am I qualified to participate as someone from Nigeria based in the UK? To generalize this question is if you're based in one place and want to do work in another, is that okay? So yes, if you identify as a local actor for the region you wish to do your project. We do know folks can be, faculty, a student in another country, yet still tightly tied to their country, or they could have, professional life in one country and still be engaged with the other in many different scenarios. So again, we're keeping this local actor definition loose and using the broad definition we talked about earlier. Do you consider yourself one first? Do you speak the relevant languages in the place you intend to propose work? Do you have a long-term vested interest in the well-being of the place? And do you have professional and social presence in this place? For example, though, I will say that the specific question we got, it wasn't clear whether this person wanted to do work in the UK or Nigeria. And just to give an example as a side note, given our priority list, if the exact same work were to happen in Nigeria or the UK, Nigeria would be prioritized given our priority list, unless the UK group happened to make some scenario, some really compelling case that is unlikely. So for the sixth question, I don't see BAMs or reference grade equipment on your open data guidance doc. Can we apply for reference grade equipment? And we wanted to give a strong answer that yes, you can. Again, the open data guidance doc shares data-related policies of several sensor companies, but it's not comprehensive and in no way an endorsement or anti-endorsement of any company. Again, it was designed to take away some of that workload from applicants for figuring out these parameters themselves. As we have more information from sensor companies, we will add to this list. And again, meanwhile, applicants are free to reach out to vendors not on the list to ascertain whether their data-related policies match our guidance or not. And then the last question, 7, are indirect costs allowed? So indirect costs are allowed. Applicants can adjust the budget format once they download a copy from the template if they'd like to include these. And more importantly, I want to emphasize, we are not setting a fixed percentage or cap for indirect costs, partly because we know norms will vary on this across geographies, but mostly because we're looking for a certain level of impact to be achieved with the funds we award within the confines of the funds we have. And that's the end goal for us. So if an applicant's able to make the case that they can achieve that impact within our funding boundaries, that's the main component of the application. So we are flexible in the specific budget makeup that we have. And I will say we are fortunate in the way that we have received funding in order to be able to do that. So with that, we've made it through the questions. I know there's several that are likely still pending in the Q&A. I'll give it a moment here as far as also catching up on those pieces, but I'll also say again that we will be sharing the updated FAQ with any questions that we didn't get. We've also listed our email here to follow up with any questions that you might have. Really encourage you to apply if you think this opportunity fits with you. Really appreciate you sharing this opportunity with your network for others who you think might find it valuable. And lastly, I do want to point you to our Epic AirWatch newsletter. So this is a monthly newsletter we put out that shares resources that are either directly air quality related or could be air quality related, like perhaps an AI environment funding opportunity that from our network and what we see might be available out there in the world for air quality, as well as highlights various local actors doing this work already and achieving amazing things, as well as other events going on in the broader international air quality community and reports. And with that, lastly, I want to thank you again for attending. And I want to thank Open Philanthropy for the funding that's making this possible, both, again, the funding itself, as well as the way that we've received this funding that lets us be flexible in how we fund those downstream for us. And I think that will result in more impact. So with that, I want to thank you again. Again, we'll send this recording around, and I hope everyone has a good day wherever you are in the world. Thank you.